The Galactic King sat upon his ornate throne, a figure whose mere presence commanded the attention of the entire galaxy. His eyes, cold and calculating, surveyed the room filled with sycophants and admirers. He thrived on power, a ruler who had built his empire on the back of spectacles and brutality. His court was a place of constant entertainment, where the best warriors, creatures, and machines from across the stars clashed for his amusement. To him, this was not just a pastime but a demonstration of his unchallenged dominance. He reveled in the cheers of the crowd, in the fear and admiration he inspired. To keep his subjects loyal, he offered them a steady diet of blood and glory, gladiatorial games that showcased his might. Yet, there was a restlessness within him. He had conquered countless worlds, faced every warrior species known to the galaxy, and found no more worthy opponents. It was all becoming routine. The thrill of combat, of witnessing the fall of powerful foes, had dulled. He needed something new, something that would reignite the spark of excitement in his grand arena. That was when his gaze fell upon Earth, a small, blue-green planet, largely ignored by the larger galactic community. A backwater world, populated by a species still clinging to primitive technology, barely aware of what lay beyond their solar system. A smirk spread across his face. He decided that this backwater would provide his next entertainment. In a display of arrogance, he called for an open challenge, transmitting his message across the vast reaches of space to Earth. His face appeared on screens around the globe, his voice booming with contempt. He mocked humanity openly, calling them a primitive species, barely above savages, unworthy of their place in the galaxy. But he would give them a chance to prove themselves, he announced with a sneer. A chance to show they could be more than the pathetic creatures he believed them to be. Earth was to send its best warriors to his grand arena, to face challenges of strength, cunning, and survival. They would serve as the latest entertainment for his court, a spectacle to amuse his subjects. The reaction on Earth was immediate and intense. Shock spread across governments and media outlets. The very idea that an alien ruler would challenge Earth in such a public and demeaning way was both terrifying and infuriating. Debates erupted in political chambers and on public forums. Some argued that they should ignore the challenge, refuse to play into the hands of a tyrant who seemed to seek only to humiliate them. Others, more cautious, saw it as a trap, a way to lure Earth's best and brightest away, leaving the planet vulnerable to an attack. But there were those who saw an opportunity in the challenge. They argued that this was Earth's chance to step onto the galactic stage, to prove that humanity was more than the sum of its technology, that it had spirit, strength, and resilience. In the midst of this heated debate, an ex-Special Forces operative stepped forward. A seasoned veteran, known for their tactical brilliance and unmatched resilience, they had faced countless dangers in the line of duty. With a calm, steady voice, the operative offered to lead a team to face the Galactic King's challenge. They spoke not of victory, but of proving humanity's worth, of showing that Earth was not to be mocked or underestimated. The message resonated. Across the globe, individuals began to volunteer. Athletes with unparalleled physical prowess, engineers with minds that could solve any problem, survivalists who knew how to adapt to the harshest conditions. A team began to take shape, a diverse group representing the best humanity had to offer. Training began immediately, every member pushed to their limits. The operative drilled them on tactics and teamwork, understanding that their strength would lie not in brute force but in their ability to adapt and outthink their opponents. They studied the recordings of past games, analyzing every move, every pattern, searching for any weaknesses they could exploit. Meanwhile, the Galactic King watched with amusement, confident that his spectacle would proceed as planned. He had no doubt that these humans would provide a brief diversion before falling, like so many before them. To him, they were already defeated. But on Earth, the spirit of defiance was growing. The team was preparing, not just for a challenge, but for a fight that would define their place in the galaxy. They were ready to show that humanity was more than a curiosity, more than an underdog to be toyed with. They would meet the Galactic King's challenge head-on, not as his entertainment but as warriors determined to prove that Earth could stand with the best the galaxy had to offer. As the day of their departure approached, there was a sense of anticipation and unity. For better or worse, they were about to face the greatest test of their lives. And they would do it together. The Earthlings arrived at the Galactic King's grand arena, stepping into a place unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a colossal structure, its sheer scale intimidating even before they saw what awaited them inside. The walls seemed to stretch endlessly upward, covered in alien symbols and glowing runes that pulsed with an eerie light. The crowd, thousands of alien spectators, filled the stands, their strange, inhuman faces alight with anticipation. The arena floor itself was a sprawling expanse, an ever-changing landscape of shifting sands, jagged rocks, and unpredictable terrain that seemed almost alive. The air was thick with the buzz of excitement, and the hum of alien technology, the atmosphere electric with the promise of bloodshed. Everywhere the Earthlings looked, they saw signs of danger. Strange, metallic structures loomed over the battlefield, emitting faint, ominous sounds. Unknown devices hovered above, scanning them with unblinking, mechanical eyes. The terrain itself was a patchwork of unfamiliar elements, pits filled with a viscous, glowing liquid, spikes that seemed to emerge from the ground at random intervals, and walls that shifted and changed, creating new barriers and paths. It was clear that the arena had been designed not just for combat but to disorient, confuse, and terrify those who entered. From his elevated throne, the Galactic King watched with a sly smile. He rose, his voice booming across the arena, magnified by unseen speakers. He welcomed the Earthlings in a tone dripping with condescension, calling them brave for accepting his challenge, yet foolish for believing they could survive it. He gestured to his own champions, towering figures standing at the edge of the arena, a grotesque mix of genetically modified warriors, their muscles bulging and eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. Beside them stood alien beasts, massive creatures with razor-sharp claws and armored hides, growling and snapping at the air. Behind them loomed mechanical constructs, towering machines with weapons gleaming in the strange light. The king mocked the human team, his words intended to belittle and undermine their confidence. He spoke of their fragility, their lack of experience in such arenas, and how their outdated tactics would fail them. He taunted them, questioning whether their bodies would withstand even the first challenge. His words were calculated, aimed to instill doubt and fear, to make them feel small and insignificant in the face of his grand spectacle. Then, with a flourish, he announced the first challenge, a combat scenario designed to crush their spirits from the outset. The arena floor shifted, revealing an array of traps and obstacles. The ground trembled as it opened into pits of fire and spikes, walls rearranged themselves into confusing labyrinths, and hidden turrets emerged, ready to target anything that moved. The king's elite warriors, chosen for their brutality and skill, moved into position, their eyes locked on the Earthlings with murderous intent. The alien beasts snarled, saliva dripping from their fangs, while the mechanical constructs hummed to life, their weapons gleaming menacingly. The king's intention was clear: to overwhelm them quickly, to make them an example for any other species who dared to think they could challenge his rule. The Earthlings felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon them, felt the pressure of the moment. For a brief second, doubt flickered in their minds. But the ex-Special Forces operative, their leader, moved quickly to focus their attention. There was no time to dwell on the king's taunts or the spectacle around them. They had trained for this, prepared for the unknown. The operative knew that their strength lay not in brute force but in adaptability, in their ability to think on their feet. They began to assess the situation, scanning the arena with sharp, calculating eyes. They observed the layout, noting the traps and potential hazards. The turrets were fixed, with limited angles of attack. The beasts seemed enraged, likely controlled by some mechanism or signal. The elite warriors, while formidable, were slow and heavily armored, relying on sheer strength over speed. The team quickly realized that the key was to keep moving, to stay unpredictable. They could not afford to be cornered or pinned down. The operative directed them to spread out, to draw the enemy into the traps set for them. They needed to turn the arena's design against itself. The king, sensing their resolve, amplified his taunts, trying to provoke a rash move. But the Earthlings remained calm. They moved with purpose, communicating through gestures and signals, each member falling into their role. The engineers among them quickly identified the vulnerabilities in the mechanical constructs and began to exploit them. The survivalists used their knowledge of terrain and natural movement to evade and mislead the alien beasts, guiding them into the pits and traps scattered throughout the arena. The athletes relied on their agility, dodging the turrets and confusing the enemy with their speed. As the first clash began, it was not the slaughter the king had expected. The Earthlings moved like a unit, coordinating their attacks and defenses with fluid precision. They adapted quickly, using the terrain to their advantage, forcing the king's warriors into narrow passages where their size became a disadvantage. The beasts, driven into a frenzy, stumbled into traps meant for the humans. The mechanical constructs, targeted by the engineers, malfunctioned and exploded, causing chaos among the king's ranks. The Earthlings stood at the entrance of the Galactic King's grand arena, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes fixed upon them. The structure stretched out before them, a colossal expanse that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Towers of alien architecture rose into the sky, shimmering with strange, pulsating lights that danced across the metallic surfaces. The walls were adorned with holographic images of past games, depicting scenes of glorious combat and brutal defeats. The air was thick with anticipation, a low hum of excitement buzzing through the massive crowd that filled the stands, each spectator eager to witness the bloodshed that was sure to come. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, shifting slightly as if it were alive, responding to their every movement. The terrain was a bizarre amalgamation of different surfaces. Some areas were slick with a strange, slippery substance, while others were covered in jagged rocks or soft, shifting sand. Strange devices hovered above the arena, their purpose unclear, but their presence unnerving. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of impending violence, an energy that seemed to grow with every breath they took. The Earthlings could feel the arena pressing down on them, its design meant to intimidate, to break their spirit before the battle even began. The Galactic King stood high above on a platform overlooking the arena, a figure of regal authority draped in ornate armor that gleamed under the harsh lights. He exuded a sense of confidence and arrogance, a ruler accustomed to winning. His voice boomed across the arena, amplified by unseen speakers, as he welcomed the Earthlings in a tone laced with mockery. He reminded them that they were far from home, surrounded by species that had already judged them as weak and insignificant. He gestured to his champions, introducing each with a flourish. The crowd erupted in cheers as giant, genetically modified warriors stepped forward, their bodies bristling with muscle and weapons. Alien beasts, twice the size of any creature on Earth, roared and snarled, their eyes fixed hungrily on the newcomers. Massive mechanical constructs loomed behind them, their weapons systems glowing ominously, ready to unleash destruction at a moment's notice. The king taunted the humans, dismissing them as mere fodder for his champions. He questioned their resolve, their courage, their ability to even survive a single challenge in his arena. The spectators jeered, a cacophony of alien voices filling the air with derisive laughter. The king's words were designed to get under their skin, to break their confidence, to make them doubt their chances before they had even begun. It was a game he had played many times before, and it had always worked. He expected fear and hesitation, but instead, he was met with steely determination. The first challenge was announced with a dramatic flourish. The ground shifted and transformed, revealing a complex, ever-changing environment filled with obstacles and traps. Walls sprang up, forming a labyrinthine maze. Pits opened up in random places, filled with glowing, acidic liquid. The air itself seemed to ripple with hidden dangers, as drones buzzed above, scanning for targets. The king's elite warriors moved into position, their faces set in grim determination. They were trained for this, bred for combat, and their confidence was evident in every step they took. They were here to deliver a quick, crushing blow, to show the galaxy that Earthlings were no more than a temporary diversion. The Earthlings, led by their ex-Special Forces operative, quickly assessed the situation. They knew they were at a disadvantage. Their enemies were stronger, more familiar with the terrain, and had the support of the crowd. But they also knew that panic would be their undoing. They had been trained to adapt, to think on their feet, to turn disadvantage into opportunity. The operative called for calm, urging everyone to stay focused. They began to observe their surroundings closely, noticing the subtle changes in the terrain, the patterns in the traps, and the behavior of the king's warriors. They quickly realized that the maze was designed to confuse, to force them into narrow choke points where the elite warriors could overpower them. But they also saw opportunities, areas where the traps could be triggered remotely, where the terrain could be used to their advantage. They communicated through hand signals, moving with precision, staying low, and using the shadows to hide their movements. The operative instructed the team to spread out, to draw the enemy into the maze, to use their numbers and familiarity with unpredictability to turn the king's strategy against him. The king watched, his smile unwavering but his eyes narrowing slightly. He could see that the humans were not falling into his trap as easily as he had hoped. They were moving with purpose, not blindly running into danger. The elite warriors advanced, expecting easy prey, but soon found themselves chasing shadows. The Earthlings moved with a fluidity that was hard to predict, avoiding direct confrontation while testing the boundaries of their environment. They triggered traps that were meant for them, catching the king's warriors off guard. One of the beasts lunged forward, only to fall into a hidden pit, its roars echoing through the arena. The crowd gasped in surprise. The humans were adapting, learning the arena's layout quickly, exploiting every small mistake. The elite warriors, who had expected a straightforward victory, began to hesitate, their confidence shaken by the Earthlings' unexpected resilience. The king's taunts grew louder, more aggressive, trying to keep his champions focused, but the first seeds of doubt had already been sown. The humans continued to move with precision, turning the environment against their opponents. They knew they couldn't win with sheer force, so they focused on outmaneuvering, on exploiting every small advantage. They used the traps to their favor, drawing the king's forces into areas where their size and strength became liabilities. They found weaknesses in the mechanical constructs, targeting them with makeshift weapons, causing malfunctions that sent the machines stumbling and crashing. The moment the signal was given, the king's warriors surged forward with a thunderous roar, their massive forms charging across the arena floor. They wielded weapons forged from advanced alien technology, blades that shimmered with energy, projectiles that tore through the air with deadly precision, and armor that seemed impervious to damage. Their initial assault was brutal, a display of overwhelming force intended to crush the Earthlings swiftly and decisively. The humans, caught in the sudden rush, struggled to find their footing. The alien warriors moved with a speed and power that was almost impossible to match, their attacks relentless and devastating. At first, it seemed as if the king's prediction was coming true. The Earthlings were pushed back, forced to scramble and dodge to avoid the lethal strikes. Their movements were hesitant, their cohesion tested by the unfamiliar terrain and the sheer ferocity of the assault. The elite warriors capitalized on every mistake, pressing their advantage, driving the humans toward the arena's edges where traps and obstacles lay in wait. The crowd roared with approval, sensing an imminent defeat. The king's smug smile grew wider, his confidence unwavering. But the Earthlings were not easily broken. As they retreated, they began to notice patterns in their enemies' attacks. The king's warriors, for all their power, relied heavily on brute force, charging headlong into combat without much thought for strategy. They moved in predictable lines, swinging their weapons with all their might but leaving themselves open to counterattacks. The humans, led by their ex-Special Forces operative, started to see the gaps, the moments of hesitation, the areas where the enemy's discipline broke down. The operative quickly called for a change in tactics, urging the team to spread out, to stop meeting the enemy head-on. They began to use the terrain to their advantage, moving into narrow spaces where the large, armored warriors found it difficult to maneuver. They ducked behind obstacles, using cover to avoid the worst of the onslaught. They set traps of their own, using the alien technology scattered around the arena, hacking into devices to create distractions, setting off controlled explosions to disorient the enemy, and using environmental hazards against the king's champions. The humans worked together, communicating through quick gestures and signals, coordinating their movements to create confusion. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The king's warriors, expecting an easy victory, found themselves struggling to adapt to the humans' guerrilla tactics. The Earthlings moved like shadows, appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye, striking from unexpected angles and then retreating before the enemy could react. The first signs of doubt began to show on the faces of the alien champions. They were not used to this kind of fighting, this level of unpredictability. Their confidence wavered as they realized they were not dealing with mere prey, but with opponents who could think, adapt, and exploit every mistake. The humans scored their first victory when they managed to isolate one of the largest warriors, drawing him into a narrow passageway where his size worked against him. Using quick, precise strikes, they targeted the weak points in his armor, bringing him down with a coordinated attack. The crowd, which had been jeering moments before, fell silent in surprise. The Earthlings had won a round, against all odds. The king's smile faded slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Buoyed by their success, the humans pressed their advantage. They continued to adapt, learning from each encounter, growing more confident with every move. They used the environment creatively, turning it into a weapon. They pushed the king's warriors into traps, exploited the terrain's quirks, and used misdirection to confuse their enemies. Each victory was a small one, but it built momentum. The crowd, sensing the shift in the air, began to murmur. The jeers became quieter, replaced by a sense of grudging respect. The humans were not just surviving, they were winning. The king watched from his throne, his fingers tapping impatiently against the armrest. His frustration was palpable. This was not how he had imagined the challenge unfolding. He had expected the Earthlings to be crushed, to serve as a quick, entertaining spectacle. Instead, they were defying his expectations, proving themselves far more formidable than he had anticipated. He could see his warriors faltering, their movements growing less certain, their morale dipping with each unexpected defeat. Determined to reassert control, the king raised the stakes. He commanded his aides to release more powerful opponents, to introduce new and more lethal challenges. He unleashed massive war beasts, creatures bred for destruction with razor-sharp claws and impenetrable hides. He activated new traps, ones that had never been seen before, plasma mines that could vaporize anything in their radius, energy fields that could slice through flesh and bone in an instant. The arena transformed into a chaotic battleground filled with new dangers. But the Earthlings did not break. They faced each new challenge with the same resolve, the same determination to survive and win. They continued to adapt, using the environment and their own creativity to counter every threat. They found ways to trick the beasts, leading them into dead ends or using their own strength against them. They learned to anticipate the traps, to read the subtle signs in the terrain that hinted at danger. Every step forward was hard won, but it was progress. The crowd watched with growing fascination, unable to look away. The humans were proving themselves to be something more than mere entertainment. They were showing the galaxy what it meant to fight with heart, with ingenuity, with the will to never give up. And the Galactic King, now visibly irritated, could do nothing but watch as his carefully planned spectacle began to unravel. The arena's atmosphere shifted as the challenges became more intense. The Galactic King, angered by the humans' unexpected successes, ordered a series of increasingly difficult trials, each one crafted to exploit every conceivable weakness. Massive, monstrous creatures were unleashed, their growls echoing through the arena. Some were swift and agile, attacking in packs with razor-sharp claws, while others were massive and lumbering, their footsteps causing the ground to tremble. Each battle seemed more impossible than the last, the creatures more brutal and the conditions more extreme. But the battles were just the beginning. The king introduced puzzles that required quick thinking and sharp intellect under pressure, complex mazes that shifted constantly, traps that needed to be disarmed with split-second decisions, and riddles that seemed unsolvable. These trials were meant to break the human spirits, to exhaust them mentally as well as physically. On top of that, they faced endurance tests in brutal conditions, intense heat that seared the skin, frigid cold that numbed the senses, and sudden gravity shifts that turned every step into a test of balance and strength. The king believed that by bombarding them with a relentless mix of challenges, he could force them to their knees. Yet the humans persisted. Their leader, the ex-Special Forces operative, saw through the king's tactics. They understood that these trials were designed not just to test their physical limits but to fracture their resolve, to sow doubt and despair. But instead of succumbing, they embraced the chaos, using it as a chance to showcase their greatest strengths: creativity, adaptability, and a refusal to surrender. The operative encouraged the team to think outside the box, to turn the arena's own weapons and traps against their enemies. They began to use the alien technology against itself, manipulating devices they barely understood to create new advantages. A trap intended to ensnare them was repurposed as a barrier against charging beasts. Alien puzzles were decoded and used to outmaneuver the king's warriors. The team worked together, combining their diverse skills in unexpected ways. An engineer bypassed the security on an alien control panel, rerouting energy surges to disable turrets. A survivalist used the shifting gravity fields to leap onto a monstrous creature's back, turning its size against it. An athlete, understanding the rhythm of the traps, timed their movements perfectly, using the traps meant to ensnare them to slow down their opponents instead. Their tactics became bolder, more unpredictable. They leveraged their knowledge of psychology, recognizing that their resilience was beginning to unsettle not just the king's warriors but the crowd itself. They started to play to the audience, turning moments of tension into displays of bravery and wit, drawing out cheers even from those who had initially mocked them. They feigned weakness, only to strike with greater ferocity. They appeared cornered, only to reveal a carefully laid plan that turned the situation in their favor. Every move was calculated, every step purposeful. They were turning the psychological warfare back on their enemies, making the king's forces doubt their own superiority. Their victories multiplied. They survived battles that should have been unwinnable, solved puzzles that seemed beyond their understanding, and endured trials that would have broken others. With each success, their confidence grew, and they began to build momentum. The alien spectators, who had once looked down on them with disdain, began to shift in their seats, their expressions changing from scorn to curiosity, and then to respect. The humans were proving themselves not just as warriors but as thinkers and strategists, capable of outmaneuvering and outsmarting their enemies in ways no one had anticipated. The king's advisors exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves as they watched the tide turning. The humans' ability to adapt, their sheer unpredictability, was unlike anything the arena had ever seen. Even the most experienced of the king's warriors seemed disoriented by the humans' unorthodox methods. The crowd, sensing the shifting dynamics, began to cheer for the humans, their voices growing louder with each new victory. For the first time, the king's authority seemed challenged, not by a rival empire, but by a handful of Earthlings who refused to break. The king, now visibly seething, decided to escalate further. His voice boomed through the arena, declaring that the time had come to end this farce. He ordered the release of his most powerful champion, a massive warrior, towering above all others, clad in impenetrable armor that gleamed like polished steel. This champion was a living legend, known throughout the galaxy as an unbeatable force, a figure who had never known defeat. The arena fell silent as he stepped forward, his presence alone radiating menace and strength. The alien spectators held their breath, waiting to see how the humans would respond to this new threat. The humans stood firm, understanding the gravity of what lay before them. They knew this was the king's final play, his attempt to crush their spirit once and for all. But they also recognized the opportunity. If they could defeat this champion, it would turn the tide completely, solidifying their place not just in the arena but in the eyes of the entire galaxy. They prepared themselves, drawing on everything they had learned, every skill and strategy they had honed in the previous trials. The king's champion entered the arena with a roar that silenced the crowd. Towering over everything, he was a figure of raw power, encased in gleaming, impenetrable armor. His presence alone seemed to shake the very ground, his every step echoing through the massive structure. The alien spectators, who had been caught up in the humans' unexpected successes, now held their breath. This warrior was a legend, undefeated, a force that had crushed countless opponents before. The Galactic King leaned forward on his throne, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He believed that this final showdown would end the farce, proving once and for all the futility of human resistance. The Earthlings, though battered, bruised, and exhausted, stood their ground. They knew this was their ultimate test, the challenge they had been preparing for since the moment they entered the arena. The operative, their leader, quickly assessed the situation. They had seen this warrior's battles, they knew his reputation. He was strong, almost unstoppable, with a relentless fighting style that relied on sheer force and unyielding offense. But they also saw something else, overconfidence. The champion expected them to falter, to be paralyzed by fear. That would be his downfall. The team huddled together for a brief moment, whispering their plan. They knew they couldn't defeat him in direct combat. His size and strength made that impossible. Instead, they decided to turn the arena against him, to use his own might as a weapon against him. The operative outlined a strategy that involved luring the champion into a trap they had rigged using the arena's systems. They had already studied the alien technology, learned its quirks, and now they intended to exploit every advantage they could find. The battle began, and the champion wasted no time. He charged forward with incredible speed, swinging a massive blade that could cut through solid rock like butter. The Earthlings scattered, each moving with a purpose, drawing him into a specific section of the arena where they had set their trap. They knew they had to keep him moving, keep him off balance. The champion's attacks were relentless, his strength almost overwhelming. Every swing of his blade sent shockwaves through the ground, every step thundered like a drumbeat. The humans narrowly dodged and evaded, each near miss a testament to their agility and reflexes. The champion's overconfidence began to show. He pushed harder, convinced that his raw power would eventually wear them down. But the Earthlings were not running aimlessly. They led him toward an area where they had rigged several of the arena's devices to malfunction on command. As he charged into the space, the operative triggered the first trap. A hidden panel on the floor opened, releasing a burst of energy that caught the champion off guard, staggering him for a moment. He recovered quickly, though, and continued his assault with renewed fury. The humans, keeping their distance, adjusted their plan on the fly. They baited him toward another area, this time triggering a series of laser turrets they had hacked earlier. The beams shot out in rapid succession, forcing the champion to shield himself. His armor was resilient, but the barrage slowed his movements, giving the humans precious seconds to reposition. But the plan was far from foolproof. The champion, realizing he was being manipulated, began to adapt, avoiding the traps and devices with increasing skill. The humans found themselves pushed to their limits, forced to rethink their tactics as the battle raged on. Several times, it seemed their plan would fail. The champion came dangerously close to catching them, and the crowd gasped with every near miss. Yet, every time, the humans regrouped, finding new ways to turn the tide. They threw everything they had into the fight, every bit of knowledge, every ounce of creativity. The climax came when they managed to lure the champion into the center of the arena, the most treacherous part of their plan. The operative signaled the final phase, knowing they had only one shot. They activated a sequence that caused the floor beneath the champion to shift and destabilize. A hidden energy grid, previously dormant, flickered to life, creating a magnetic field that trapped the champion in place. For a moment he struggled, his strength allowing him to resist, but the humans acted fast, using the remaining traps to attack from all sides. The champion roared in defiance, breaking free from the field's grip, but it was too late. In his effort to escape, he had exposed himself, and the humans capitalized on that split-second opening. They moved in tandem, striking at his armor's weak points, using their weapons to leverage every advantage they could find. The champion faltered, his movements slowing, his balance wavering. With one final, coordinated effort, the humans executed their plan perfectly. The champion, caught in their trap, fell to his knees, and then to the ground. The arena went silent, a stunned disbelief settling over the crowd. The Galactic King, who had been so confident in his champion's victory, sat frozen, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. His undefeated warrior lay defeated, bested by the very beings he had so openly mocked. The crowd erupted, a mix of awe, respect, and newfound admiration for the Earthlings. The king, his face twisted with rage, had no choice but to stand and acknowledge their victory. Bound by his own rules, he declared them the winners. His voice, once booming with arrogance, now carried a reluctant respect. The humans had proven themselves against his greatest warrior, had shown that they were not weak or insignificant, but a force to be reckoned with. The Earthlings, though exhausted, stood tall. They had done the impossible, and they had done it together. They had faced the greatest challenges the galaxy could offer and emerged victorious. They had shown not only the strength of their bodies but the strength of their minds, their creativity, their resilience.